PREUSSEN vs. Invaders Episode 5. What happened so far? The PREUSSEN and Invaders alliances both happened to be active on map 1950. First, Invaders had managed to conquer an amazingly large part of the right side of the map. PREUSSEN had conquered many bases on the left side of the map. When both alliances clashed in the middle, PREUSSEN started to take this map very seriously and became much more active. PREUSSEN knew about the danger of an opponent who had already conquered 100 maps completely and would be able to get material from there over the highway without end. But first, the highway was closed, and in the north, PREUSSEN used this phase to make the river as a border, which was much easier to defend. These bases also secured access to the northern and western highways. To the south, PREUSSEN had numerous home bases positioned along the highway, which secured access to the southern highway. Then, when the highway opened, PREUSSEN was able to develop numerical superiority in the south because its own supplies had very short routes from the highway. Invaders, on the other hand, not only had to tie up many groups to secure access to the highway to the east, but had a time-consuming supply route. This allowed PREUSSEN to capture numerous bases on the lower rim, but a railway ran across it and all the train bases were owned by Invaders. Now PREUSSEN faced the challenge of having to fight extremely large numbers of trains without having any train on its own. At the same time, the Invaders counterattacked, but most of them were intercepted before they could reach their target. The bases outside the range of the trains were captured first. Very nice to see the dancing of the H-5 helicopters during this base attack. They do quite good damage to the base and therefore are perceived as a high threat by the base. However, as long as the base is shooting at a group, it wants to defeat it completely before changing targets. To prevent vulnerable helicopters from becoming targets of the base, they must fly out of the base range just before the end of a group and then return. The use of many base attack helicopters greatly reduces the required number of bisons and rests. Bases slightly out of range were also taken if they could not be protected by trains. Not only was this delaying the inevitable attack of the rail line, but with each base the group limit grew. PREUSSEN would have to give it its all to make the breakthrough at the railway. Then came the moment when PREUSSEN wanted to make the breakthrough. It was first the scene of T-34Cs, Mauls and Katyushas. Cannon fodder sent ahead drew enemy fire, making the firing Invaders troops the target of the long-range units. The firepower of the Katyushas is enormous, and the ammunition was enough to knock out the trains in front of the base. This cleared the way for the next wave of bisons and with them the actual base attack. The border to the south was extremely long, and so Invaders had no way of knowing in advance at which point the breakthrough would be made. So Invaders had spread its own material along the border in front of and behind their own bases. The first breakthrough in front of the attack base would not mean that this base could be taken. Gradually, the equipment parked elsewhere came to the aid of the attacked base. The first to arrive were a few groups of Mauls, but these drove straight into the T-34C groups of PREUSSEN, which easily won the duel by superior numbers. This was followed by Tiger and M3 groups, but since these came without sufficient air defense, they quickly evaporated under the Preußen helicopter carpet. One M3 group was able to escape to another invaders base. Such attacks were doomed to failure simply because they involved only one type of weapon. Successful is the battle of linked weapons, consisting of units that can take enemy fire due to their large numbers or extremely good armor. Behind them, units with long range on firing targets, such as T-34C, MALS and Katyushas, accompanied by sufficient air defense. Proprietary helicopters such as the R4 Helicarpet and various aircraft then further enhance the dynamism of the entire army. The battle showed that invaders did not apply the principle of linked arms. It therefore became a great success for Preußen. Despite all these counterattacks, the actual attack on the train base was never interrupted. Then again, a group of MALS came from SAM 60. This demonstrates another serious mistake invaders made here, because the material was at very different distances from the attack base. The groups all arrived one after the other. Small attacks are much easier to repel than large, massive attacks. Despite the ongoing attack on the base, invaders would have been better off waiting until the material was complete and only then attacking in a concentrated manner. Invaders were obviously panicking because they did not want to lose the railway under any circumstances. This tempted them to another fatal mistake. When the invaders then sent T-34C and MALS again, the Katyushas of Preußen could easily defeat them. Ammunition transporters had reloaded the Katyushas in the meantime. When invaders tried to withdraw in the face of Preußen superiority, the Preußen Helicarpet arrived. Invaders had some anti-aircraft with them this time, but a single group of FP6 is far too few. This is the first to be knocked out by the helis, and so the ground forces were left unprotected, facing their complete annihilation. Preußen now did not want to wait any longer until invaders would again want to disrupt the ongoing attack. While the attack on the train base continued, Preußen sent Bisons to one of the neighboring bases. Since Preußen had expected much higher losses in the actual base attack, there was simply enough material still standing around for that. Obviously, Mr. XY had not expected an attack on this base at this time. When the train base was taken, the attack continued immediately and the base of Ad 80 was also attacked. The invaders' defense was destroyed and had to be brought in again from the right highway. Preußen used this time ideally and drove a deep wedge into the enemy positions. The two bases taken in the aftermath secured the captured train base to the front. Not all Invaders players were online at the time, as can be seen here in the example of Prince 13. The advantage of the attacker is to determine the place and time of the attack. All Preußen players were informed about this for a long time, and that is why so many of them were online. Invaders could have guessed that opening the highway would be the starting signal for Preußen's attack. But apparently, invaders felt too superior because of their size. Players who are not online are easy targets. So a lot of material could be destroyed in front of such bases, which were inactive at that moment. This reduced the risk of a counterattack. Since the Prince 13 base was only level 2, it was then immediately attacked directly. The poison defense troops had long since been north of the attacked base. However, there were no more disruptive attacks from the invaders. Preussen had deepened the wedge in the enemy front enormously in a few minutes. It was an attack without interruption. Incessant supplies were brought across the lower highway. From the captured train base, a long line of bases already stretched deep into the rear. The objective was to extend this all the way to the river. This not only allowed supplies from the already captured side of the river, but also cut off the bases to the left of the Aale from supplies. Henceforth, only small attacks could be expected from there, and for them the cut-off area would probably be difficult to defend. It was now important to expand the bases in this Aale. The further success of Preussen on this map would now largely depend on whether this Aale would hold. In all attacks, you can see that Preussen refrains from using cards, because they would be too vulnerable for counterattacks. Moreover, at the rate these attacks were going, the ammunition supply could not be lifted. Instead, the base attack helicopters of Spire Hunter were used again and again. These do not require ammunition in Desert Horror. To make the line of bases through invaders' territory more stable, it was widened by more attacks. Thus, any attacks from the cauldron would run up at different bases than attacks from the eastern part. This further base of Mr. XY is located on the side of the Aale facing the cauldron, which could not be defended with material from the eastern highway. Thus, this attack proceeded completely undisturbed. On the other hand, this apparent pause on the eastern edge of the Aale gave invaders some breathing room to concentrate material. Then, during the next attack on a Mike Dog base, jamming attacks by invaders promptly started. Again and again, invaders sent a group of Braiders forward, then fired on anything the Braiders attacked with trains standing at a distance. Invaders still had many trains, which I just can't show here because they were firing from outside the visible area. The Preussen helicarpet did work great against the invaders' Braiders, but in doing so it exposed itself to the fire of the BP-44 anti-aircraft trains. Thus Preussen reverted to proven strategy of combining cannon fodder and ranged units, it as T-34Cs, Katyushas and Mauls. This eventually led to the destruction of all trains. At the same time, the left edge was attacked again. There, the situation was unchanged. Invaders obviously did not have many groups left in the cauldron to defend. Little by little, Preussen conquered more train bases and thus secured the achieved success more and more. At the same time, one cannot claim that all invaders players had already given up, because defensive towers continued to be rebuilt. The invaders player J.R. Para obviously was not online. Produced helicopters are parked automatically behind the base, so Preussen could attack undisturbed in front and destroy the helicopters in the rear in peace. Thus, a few hours of uninterrupted sustained attack decided Preussen's progress on this map. The complete failure of invaders against the much smaller alliance Preussen obviously led to massive contention among invaders. Some of the biggest invaders players, especially Pavarotti and Mr. XY, resigned from invaders and joined Asgard. Thus, Asgard and invaders swapped places in the rankings. Now, the loss of a ranking place alone is not a statement, but the number of completed invaders maps suddenly had reduced by 80. Now, Asgard and Invaders are facing each other there. Both will surely try to complete the maps for themselves. With this, Invaders suddenly had 80 new construction sites, and the troops standing there at the highways suddenly no longer were safe. On map 1950 there were still isolated counterattacks, but that could no longer slow down Preussen. Even though at the time of writing only 70% of the map had been conquered by Preussen, it can certainly be said that this attack literally destroyed Invaders. Preussen will clean up the map some more and will soon be shown in the leaderboard with 11 complete maps. Ready for a new epic task.